It's at 7 o'clock tonight.
Who are they playing?
Be a tough game,
Yep.
especially in Durham.
It's also tough in Chapel Hill.
Yeah. And Raleigh.
I tell you what.
Good afternoon to the Cary Rotary Club. Welcome. There's nothing like a sunshiny Tuesday to increase the energy in our lungs, isn't it? It's great to have everybody with us today. Welcome to our mid-February meeting. We got a great meeting planned. Generally speaking, one of our most popular of the year. So I'm really looking forward to it. As we get started, I'd ask Howard Manning, if you please lead us in the prayer and the pledge.
Thank you so much, President Griffin. Let us bow our heads. Father, as we come before you with hearts of thanksgiving and just being so grateful for all the provisions that you've given us, we would like to start our prayer today with a short remembrance for Mr. Harold Park. Harold was one of the 8 people that were missing in the plane crash off the coast of North Carolina, and also a good friend of one of our fellow Rotarians, Neil Lagarde. We ask that you continue to comfort his family as they go through these tough times. Our Father, we again thank you for the many bountiful blessings that you've given all of us. We ask now that you continue to use roll as a tool that can help to unite us, unite those who have with those who have not. Help us to overlook our differences and focus on the things that we do have in common. We thank you for this food that you provided today for the nourishment of our bodies. We pledge our bodies to your service. In your son's name, Jesus, we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Howard. Can I call on our Vice President to welcome our guests and visiting Rotarians? Camille.
So, Harold has a guest. Yes, thank you.
Aiden Jones. Aiden Jones is visiting today for his first time. He's a previous Rotarian from New Jersey. He lives just on the line of Apex Cary, and he's visiting here today to get back involved. So,
Welcome, Aiden.
Reggie has a guest.
Yes, Reggie can't be with us today, but we do want to welcome his guest, Jody Lewis. Jody, thank you for joining us. He is on page 2 of our.
I see Jody, yeah. So, Reggie has a guest, Jody, and we'd like to welcome him. Thank you.
Jody.
Welcome, Jody.
Thanks, happy to be here.
Jody's got a face on it.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, that went away.
Face on it.
Great to have both of you with us today. I guess I need to wave here in order for you to see me over there, and there he goes. Great. We do, just before we get to our program, we do have a few points of parliamentary procedure to take care of today, if I can very quickly indulge. Our club bylaws call for the slate of officers to be nominated to the club in general, with a 30-day period of consideration and a vote there following. So I've distributed to each table a listing of the nominations that have been made and considered through a nominating committee who surfaced the names of our proposed officers. There was a vetting process that Camille, Rod, and myself worked with through each candidate. And the board has also given their stamp of approval for consideration. If you'll give me one moment, I want to make sure I put this up for the folks online so they see it. So I'm pleased to share. Yes, sir.
What are some names?
That's an excellent question. One of the things that is wonderful about our club is the sense of continuity. So you'll make note that there are a number of names associated with chairs that are not voted, who are currently serving in those roles and are proposed to continue as chairs of those committees or in those offices. You'll see at the top, Rod Brooks, as president-elect, will step into the president's role, Camille as VP into president-elect. And we're very pleased to put in nomination Kristen Sutton's name to be considered as vice president, which would make her president in the year 24-25, I think is what we said, which seems so far away. Paul Wazalkevich will continue as treasurer. Kevin Peach has agreed to, I said treasurer, didn't I? I meant secretary. Kevin Peach has agreed to step in for a 2-year term as treasurer, succeeding Blair Hatcher. I want to thank Blair for his service. Frank Schell is noted here as our assistant treasurer. His is a non-board position, but was brought in to help us with the day-to-day inner workings of the finances recently. Then as I want to go down to the youth services chairs, Bill Fletcher will be ably assisted as a co-chair by Darren Gay. We're very thrilled about that. Gail Cabrera has agreed to step in as social media and bulletin chair. So while I'm very pleased to present this slate of officers for your consideration, our bylaws do call for an open nomination process. So if there are any others that members would propose, please do so now or in the next week or so, and we'll get those folks posted on this slate. Otherwise, we'll accept a vote on this slate as part of our March 15th meeting. Any questions about that? I'm really thrilled to have the slate that we do of capable people, experienced people, and dedicated folks. So I thank everyone for their willingness to serve the club. Thank you. We've also got a parliamentary point to conclude from last week when past President Reggie Scales informed us that the board of the Cary Rotary Foundation has nominated Neil Lagarde as a member. And after the appropriate 7-day wait, I'd just like to call for a vote by acclamation to affirm Neil's appointment to that post. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Neil. All right, so 2 other quick points before we get to our speaker. You saw in my email this week that we have an opportunity to partner. If you're a Cary resident, you have a chance to get a free tree. The town gives away 600 trees twice a year. And registration is now open for Cary residents to apply for and receive a tree to be planted in their own backyard. In order to deliver 600 trees, they need volunteers. And so I would encourage you to join me on March 12th to help distribute those trees to those folks that have signed up. It's all going to be part of a really big Arbor Day celebration at Bond Park. So if you want more information, I have it right here. Finally, the tribe has spoken. The district training session that was scheduled for Saturday will be virtual, which means that you all have more time yet to get registered to attend that online session beginning at 10 a.m. on Saturday the 19th. Do we have any miracle moments? Yes, Camille.
I would just like to brag and announce that Green Hope High School swim team won the state championship for the 5th time for men's, and the women came in first place. And there are going to be some announcements about some records being broken. Can't tell you that. Pretty exciting.
Great, congratulations. Anybody online that has a miracle moment to share? Not today. If you think of one, yep. Okay, hang on, Mary. Go, Mary.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I really don't have a miracle moment. I just wanted to add the district assembly that's going to be virtual starting at 10. It's an hour and a half. Just an hour and a half. I really encourage everyone to go online and register, be there virtually, make a difference within our district. So please register through DACDB. Thanks, Bob.
All right, thank you, Mary, for that unsolicited testimonial. Can I call on Mr. Howell to introduce our speaker for today? Yep, I'll come back to that, Jim.
It's a great deal of pleasure that we welcome return speaker, Dr. Mike Walden, with us today. Dr. Walden is the William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor Emeritus. After 43 years at North Carolina State, Dr. Walden decided to take it easier, write more books, and do other things. And he has opened a consulting business, a new public policy business that will work on state economics and public policy. Dr. Walden has written 12 books, 300 articles. He's made 3,000 appearances, probably 1,500 here. Not quite, but we appreciate him doing that. Dr. Walden, I think, has been disappointed with economics. So he has written a new book called Real Solutions and Disunuma, a political thriller. So he can come out with any solution he wants to in that type of book. He and his wife, Mary, live in Raleigh, and it is indeed a pleasure to mention Mike. And of all the articles, he appears in all kinds of things. This is the Triangle Business section, that I received, and of course, Dr. Walden was on the panel. And I read this and it says, I think 2022 is going to be a year where we begin to face the downside of what we did in the previous 2 years in terms of saving us from the pandemic. 2022 is a year we're going to have to pay the piper. So I want to hear what kind of tune this piper is. Dr. Walden.
Thank you very much. I always get my watch off to keep track of the time. Rotarians are known for being precise, and I'm having trouble getting it off, but that's all right. I'll just look at it. I have a pen here that Hill Caro gave me to help publicize apparently an event that he is trying to secure for this area. I think it's a university, a nationwide university sporting event. So if anyone saw that and wanted to know what that was, that's what it is. I want to leave time for questions. So I'll speak for about 20 minutes and then leave time for questions. Just a little bit of background on how we got to where we were. The virus paid us a visit starting in 2020. Took us a while to figure out this was something big. When we did figure that out, we decided collectively through our elected officials that we needed to stay home. We needed to shut down several sectors of the economy. We economists knew that was going to create a recession. We had a recession. It's now officially been tagged a recession. In the spring of 2020, it was only a 3-month recession. It was very short by recession standards, but it was a very deep recession. The economy dropped about 1/3 in terms of an annualized number. But we rebounded very quickly through the summer and continued on in 2020. And actually, the economy has been growing since then. We now have an aggregate level of economic activity, gross domestic product, for those of you who are familiar with that term, that now exceeds where we were pre-recession, pre-COVID. And that is both at the national level and here in North Carolina. The unemployment rate, which got up to 16% at the height of the COVID-19 recession, is now 4%, both nationally and here in North Carolina. Personal incomes, household incomes are rising. Spending is rising. So we are in a situation now where the economy is expanding. We do have issues though, and so let me talk about those. Probably the most common issue I get asked about is the labor shortage. Well, if you look at the unemployment rate, 4% unemployment, you might think, well, we don't have a labor shortage. That's about the rate we had pre-COVID. But that's probably not a good metric to look at because you have to remember how the unemployment rate is calculated. It is not based on the number of people who could be working and who aren't. Instead, it's based on people who want to work and how many of those don't have jobs. So it's a different metric. Instead, what economists, I think, are more likely following right now to gauge the improvement in the labor market is something that doesn't get attention, gets little attention by the media, but it's called the labor force participation rate. And what that measures is it takes everyone over age 16, except those who are in the military and those who are institutionalized, takes everyone over age 16 and calculates how many of those people have a job, and if they don't have a job, are there any who are looking for work? So you're counted as in the labor force if you have a job or if you're looking for a job. And that number came down dramatically, as you might expect, during the COVID recession. It did rebound, but unlike the unemployment rate, which is about at where we were pre-COVID recession, the labor force participation rate is still lower than it was pre-COVID. In fact, it's about 1.5 percentage points lower than it was, and that's both nationally and here in North Carolina. And to translate what that would mean, if we had all of those folks who were wanting to be in the labor force pre-COVID, now also in the labor force, North Carolina would have about 170,000
170,000 more people with jobs or looking for jobs if we have the same labor force participation rate we had pre-COVID. So that is a metric to follow. In fact, when the monthly job reports come out, both for the nation and for North Carolina, that's the first number that I look for, because I think that is the number that you want to follow. Now, good question is, why do we have fewer people in the labor force? Why are those 170,000 people that we had pre-COVID not working, or looking for work? Well, there are several reasons. Obviously, number one is COVID's still an issue. There are a lot of people who are very afraid still of COVID, obviously with very good background for that, who don't want to be out looking for work, who don't want to be around people who are working. Another reason is that childcare has become a very big problem for many young families with young children. Childcare is one of the sectors that's has had trouble finding workers. And so that's a problem for particularly mothers, because they still have the main responsibility, data show, for managing their children, who maybe want to go back to work, but they don't have a place to put their children while they're working. Or they may be concerned about school schedules. Well, schools have been somewhat erratic in terms of their schedules over the last year. Hopefully that's getting better. Another factor, and this has been very, very interesting. I've been, as Bruce mentioned, I've been an academic for 43 years, and now adding to that as a professional consulting economist. I've been through, I think this is my 8th recession, and I've never seen anything like what I'm going to tell you. And what happened, we think, because we don't have good data for this, but a lot of this is based on surveys, that a fair number of that 170,000, just to continue with the North Carolina number, a fair number of those 170,000 people who are not going back to the jobs that they previously had are people who took it upon themselves, particularly during 2020, when they had financial benefits that the federal government provided, so they were able to continue living and meeting their payments, et cetera, to what economists call upskill themselves. That is, that maybe take a person who maybe was working at a restaurant and earning minimum wage. They said to themselves during 2020, I don't want to go back to that job. I want to go back to something that is higher paid. So what I'm going to do, this person told themselves, I'm going to take this time that I have off to provide myself with better skills. And that might have been through going to community colleges for some courses. It might have been online courses, et cetera. And we think that happened, and that is a significant reason why we've had not just a labor shortage, but we've had a reallocation of labor. A lot of those folks who did work at restaurants are now maybe in the tech sector, where they're working in a business, where they're working in healthcare, where all of which they can get higher wages. So that's been a big factor. And then the last thing I'll mention is something I went through in 2021 when I decided to retire. And that is that we've seen a surge in retirements. We've seen a surge in retirements. Why? Well, just like the thought process I went through, that I was not particularly happy working home all the time with teaching, couldn't interact with colleagues, couldn't see students, and students can be challenging, but I enjoyed interacting with students. Also, I think COVID, I turned 71. I think also COVID made you think about, or at least made me think about, the future. Maybe I've got 10 good years to live, hopefully 20 good years to live. Do I want to do some other things with my life? So I decided to retire, and apparently a lot of people decided to do that also. So, and that's going to be a wild card, because I think that sometimes people retire. I don't think this is going to happen with me, but sometimes people retire and then they are unretire. I have a neighbor who also was a professor at NC State. He retired several years, he's older than me, he retired several years ago. And after about a year, he went back to work, and then he retired again, and then he went back to work. So he's retired 3 times. So all of those factors, I think, work into the fact that we have, generally speaking, a labor shortage, but more specifically, I think we've had a labor reallocation. I do think that's going to get better. I do think that as hopefully we're on the last legs of COVID, not that it's going to be banished, but it's going to be treated hopefully like the flu, where we get a booster every year. that all those issues that I talked about will start to dissipate, and that we'll see the labor shortage somewhat ease. Now, the other big issue that, in fact, this is the top issue. I've seen surveys of the population, ask them, what are your top issues? This one is at the top, inflation. The latest number we have on inflation, which came out last Friday, on an annualized basis, 7.5%. We've not seen those numbers since the late 70s and early 80s. I was a young faculty member at NC State, so clearly remember that. And plus, the country, have gotten used to very, very low inflation. In fact, throughout the 21st century, the inflation rate was rarely above a 2% annual rate. I think that happened maybe in 2 years. And the rate it was above was only by a percentage point, up to 3%. I think over the 21st century, until we've seen the inflation rate start to climb recently, the inflation rate for the annual inflation rate averaged 1.2%, very, very small. So it was a non-factor for most people. People didn't worry about it. And now they've seen 7.5%. And of course, the problem with that, there's several problems with inflation. One is that if you're a worker and you're not getting a pay raise that is commensurate with the inflation rate, obviously you're falling behind. It creates problems for businesses. I have a good friend who runs a couple of pizza restaurants. He's been here for over 30 years. He's from New York, good pizza. But he was talking to me the other day about how he goes through this tension when he sees his prices go up, and he knows if he raises his prices, his customers, and he has very loyal customers, will be upset about that. So that creates a lot of tension and a lot of aggravation for business owners. So I think a lot of people think, well, businesses just pass on those costs. A lot of agony that goes along with that. So I think those are the two big issues. And then this year, I think we might add a third issue. And the third issue is what will the Federal Reserve do to handle particularly the inflation issue? Just a little background. The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the US. Every modern economy has a central bank. Ours was created about 100 years ago. It has functions and regulatory functions, but its big function is in trying to smooth out what we call the business cycle. Our economy, most economies go through ups and downs. You grow for a while, something happens, you recede, that is a recession, come out of the recession, grow for a while, et cetera. And one of the Federal Reserve's mandates that Congress has given them is to try to smooth out that business cycle. And while you're at it, try to make sure that we're as fully employed as we can be. And on top of that, keep the inflation rate low. That's a big challenge. That's a big menu for the Federal Reserve. And you can look at their history. There have been multi-volume histories written of the Federal Reserve. They've handled that mandate well, and sometimes and poorly at other times. But over the last several years, particularly since COVID came to visit us, and we had the COVID recession, the Federal Reserve has been what economists call, they've been running a policy that has been designed to try to stimulate economic growth, to try to stimulate spending, to try to stimulate job creation. And they do this in two ways. One is by keeping interest rates low. They control a couple of interest rates directly. Most other interest rates are benchmarked off of them. And the other thing the Federal Reserve can do is to print money. Not the old-fashioned way with the printing press, but it's all digital. And they can push that money into the economy through buying bonds. The Federal Reserve has been very aggressive over the last 3 years. In pursuing that, their key interest rate has effectively been zero. I think it's officially 0.25%. And since COVID paid us a visit, the money supply has increased 85% in the country. So this has been designed to help us get through the COVID recession and help stimulate the economic recovery. I think we are now seeing, and this is what I meant in the comments that Bruce read, I think we're now seeing some of the adverse impacts of that policy, in the sense that now we have people trying to spend money. We've had markets that are interest rate sensitive, like the housing market boomed during the COVID recession and afterwards. So we have a lot of economic activity where people are trying to spend money, they're trying to buy things, they're taking out loans, and the supply is not keeping up. And importantly, one reason the supply is not keeping up because of the supply chain problems. So you have a situation now, which the late Milton Friedman, I think, so aptly coined this phrase. You have a situation now, we have too much money chasing too few goods and services. And when you have that situation, you have a ramp up in prices, i.e. you have a higher inflation rate. It's not temporary. If you look at the supply chain issues, they've eased a little bit, but most of the experts, at least that I read, say we're going to be in the supply chain problem probably for most of this year. People have money to spend and they're trying to spend it. So what the Federal Reserve is apparently doing now, apparently meaning that they have signaled they're going to do this, is to change their policy away from trying to stimulate the economy to destimulating the economy. And how do they do that? Very simply, they raise interest rates and they pull cash out of the economy by selling bonds. And they've not started doing this yet, but already, if you look, where's my friend Bill? If you look at mortgage interest rates, I just looked this morning. A year ago, they were 3% for a 30-year fix. They're already up to 4%. And this is without the Federal Reserve doing anything yet. This is the anticipation of the Federal Reserve's move. They have signaled they are going to raise interest rates this year, beginning in March when they next meet. We don't know by how much. My view, this is just Walden's view, is they're probably going to have to be more aggressive than many people would like. Their first meeting, keep your eyes on this, when they meet in March, do they come out of the gate and go up 0.25% or do they go up a full 0.5%? If they go up 0.5%, that tells me they're very, very serious. If they go up 0.25%, that tells me that, well, they hope things are going to go away so they don't have to really do this. And the problem, so what the Federal Reserve wants to do is slow down the economy, have less spending, have less job creation, have less buying. They don't want to slow it down so much that you don't just have less, that you go backwards. They don't want jobs destroyed. They don't want people's incomes going down. They don't want spending just for inflation to go down, but they want what's called a soft landing. So visualize the airplane's up here, and you're going lickety split, and you want to slow that airplane down and land it on the runway without crashing, so that you come in that with slower growth, but you get the benefit of lower inflation. That's what the Federal Reserve wants to do. Now, can they do that? Well, it's not easy. It's not like driving, another analogy I'll use, visualize the economy drive as a car, speeding ahead at 50 miles an hour. And they want to slow it down to 20, you want to slow it down to 25 miles an hour. Well, if you're driving a car, you knew that. You can do that precisely. Federal Reserve can't precisely slow the economy to the level that they want. We're dealing with behavioral reactions of people and businesses. And although we may have some data, some statistics, some models that tell us what the behavioral action will be, there's always a wild card. There's always a lot of slack there in those precise estimates. And if you go back 40 years ago, which everyone is alluding to, the last time we had inflation in this level, although it was much higher, the inflation rate in the late, I think it was 1980 or 81, peaked at 13%. And Bill, mortgage rates, you may remember, were 18%. So we're not quite that bad. But if you look at the actions of the Federal Reserve then, and this is when Paul Volcker was brought in by President Carter, Paul Volcker being a very unique person, 6'7", career bureaucrat, well-respected, always had a lit cigar with him though. When he testified before Congress, you'd have to sort of clear the smoke away because he always had a cigar going. Of course, you couldn't do that now. But anyway, he came in and he was given the charge, bring inflation down. And he did. He jumped interest rates. He pulled cash out of the economy. He got inflation cut in half within 3 years. But the cost of that was actually a fairly deep recession in the early 80s. In fact, if you look at Ronald Reagan, of course, was elected in 1980. his poll numbers were almost where President Biden's are right now, at 81, 82 at the height of the recession. The concern that a lot of economists have is that the Federal Reserve was late to getting to this. If I had an influence of the Federal Reserve, I would have started their shift in policy 6 months ago when we were dealing with 4 and 5% inflation. They didn't. They chose not to. They chose to wait. In fact, Jay Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, early on said, "This is temporary. This is going to go away. We don't need any policy changes." So I think they missed the ball there. And now I think they're going to have to move much more aggressively. So the big question, and I don't have an answer for you, the big question is, will we slow the economy? Will we have that soft landing in the economy where we grow slower, but we still grow, but we are able to squeeze out inflation? Or will that soft landing not occur? Will the metaphorical plane crash and we get a recession out of this? Now, we'll get the lower inflation too, but we'll get a recession. And when that would happen, I would think would be late part of this year. So in terms of odds, and I've said this publicly many times, and I've not changed my tune yet, I think there's a 25% chance we may have a recession at the end of this year. So I think you should factor that if you're an investment advisor, if you're a business person, I'm not telling you to plan for a recession, but have a plan if it appears there's a recession coming. So watch the Federal Reserve. Now, on that low note, let me end on a high note. The high note being, let me talk about this region. You have probably noticed, I'm sure you're all very attuned to the local news, that North Carolina has come out of the COVID recession like gangbusters. We had, there was, I think it was $10 billion? $10 billion worth of new investments. And this is investments by businesses in 2021. One of the highest, if not the highest numbers that we've ever seen. And you know, a lot of this is small investments, but of course you're well aware of the big investments. Most recently, the Triad has gotten a lot of those. And what I think this indicates, and I'm not surprised by this, I think this indicates that North Carolina is still a state that people and businesses want to go to. In fact, last year, 2021, if you look at what's called the net migration rate, this is the number of people moving into the state versus the number of people moving out. Just the raw number, North Carolina ranked 4th among all states. We ranked 4th. I think we were exceeded by Texas, Florida, maybe Arizona, but states that people typically think of as fast growing. So I think that post-COVID, we're going to pick up where we left off and probably then add some. I think our pace of economic growth is going to accelerate. And one of the big questions is, can we get growth to be spread out more evenly across the state? We were talking at the table with Bruce's, can I call it your home county, Northampton, Bruce? Bruce noted, and rightly so, that Northampton County, I think in the last 10 years, it is from this 2010 census, 2020 census, population fell 20%. And I think there were about a dozen or more states or more counties that were like that. The 21st century has been the century of the metropolitan area. Cities were revived, inner cities were revived, young people want to go to the excitement in the cities, the tech sector moved to the cities, et cetera. It's been the century of the metro area. And left out have been many rural counties, especially if you're not a rural county that's adjacent to those metro counties. And the question is whether that can be turned around. And I think one thing that could turn it around, this is an obvious answer, is if we can get reliable high-speed internet into rural areas. About 25% of people in rural areas in rural North Carolina don't even have access, to internet, let alone high-speed internet, let alone reliable internet. And now with people having experience with remote work, and some people hate remote work, other people love remote work. Think about the possibility. I'll just take one small town in eastern North Carolina, Kinston, which has struggled for decades. Think about the possibility if Kinston had reliable high-speed internet, the same quality that you have in Raleigh, You think about a young family who works but can work remotely. Let's say the business they work for is in Raleigh. They come to Raleigh and they look around and they think, no, I'm not blaming you, Bill, but they look around at the house prices and they say, my gosh, I can't afford anything here. They think about, well, maybe I can live out on the fringe area, but then I've got to commute in. Think about the possibility, though, if they can work remotely and they go to Kinston and they cut their housing cost in half, which is about the average cut that you would make in going from a robust remote area or robust metro area to a rural area. So that's something that is possible down the road. Indeed, it's the topic of my next book, which will be released February 22nd, which is called Relaunch. So that's something I'm going to be watching. I think it could be a big game changer. I still think North Carolina and obviously the Cary area, the Triangle area has great days ahead. But the question is whether we can spread those great days to more areas in North Carolina. And with that statement, I've got about 8 till. So I promise to save time for questions. Question?
Yes, you talked about the reduction in participation rate. It's my understanding that the reduction in the birth rate has resulted in many less people, young people, joining the workforce versus those retiring. Have any numbers for that?
Oh yeah, we are below replacement level. Now North Carolina has only continued to grow in population. In fact, the state demographer's population estimates were just released, updated estimates. We're at about 10.2 million people now. He estimates in 2030, we'll be at about 11 and a half, and in 2050, about 13. So we're going to continue to grow, even though we don't produce any more children per household. The difference is people are moving here from other states, and foreign immigration is important too. So yeah, I think our economy, our North Carolina economy, is still going to have workers. And indeed, in fact, it's interesting you brought this up. North Carolina State has a institute called the Institute of Emerging Issues. Each year they pick a topic to really delve into. They have a big conference. They just had their, this year's, a week ago was on education. Next year's is going to be precisely on that topic, the labor force, and I'm writing the background paper for them. So I've delved into this a lot. If you were New York State, my wife's home state, totally different picture. But I think North Carolina will be okay. Sir.
Well, thank you again for being here.
My pleasure.
Always enjoy having you. So last year, our club engaged in a strategic planning process, and we learned that economic mobility in this area and the Charlotte area was one of the lowest in the country. If you're born at this level, it's a good chance you'll stay at this level. And so as a club, in addition to addressing other issues, we kind of committed ourselves to trying to have an impact in economic mobility. So I'm wondering if you can give us any guidance there. Maybe this is a chance for you to plug in your book, but are there, what strategies would you recommend that we pursue to increase economic mobility in our area?
Well, I think the major strategy that public policy can impact, because that's a big picture, is education, which again the IEI just finished talking about. And one of their conclusions, if you can go online and see the entire presentation, which was virtual, but and Bill can step in on this because he's served on the school board for many years. Are you still on, or you're taking a break? You'll come back though, right?
Give somebody else a chance.
Yeah, but you'll come back. Anyway, I think one of the things we as a society we've gotten into is if you graduate from high school, you got to immediately go to college. Everyone's got to go to college. And there are other avenues to success. And so one of the things that the IE conference talked about was maybe we need to bring in more vocational education at the high schools, give that as an option. Maybe we need to have more opportunities for young people or people who are changing jobs to get what's called quick task training, where they don't go to school for even 2 years, they go to school for maybe 6 months, And a lot of that might be tied in with apprenticeships. So I think we might want to use perhaps too much of a word that's used too much. Reimagine education, think about other avenues that will be able to be available for young people, especially young people who aren't interested in academics, but they want to have a career. And so that would be one thing I'd start with. Other question, sir, or Bruce.
You mentioned that you thought that the Fed had held off on raising interest rates for about 6 months too long. Do you think that might also coincide with the fact that Powell was trying to get renominated and he was playing a little politics there?
Could be. I mean, I always tiptoe around politics because it's some sense a toxic topic. And I always thought when I was representing NC State that I shouldn't do that, and I still feel like I represent NC State somewhat. But yeah, I think that's a possibility. Leon asked me to mention this real fast. Another possibility could be that there are economists who are advising the president. They're in the Council of Economic Advisors who have accepted the idea of modern monetary theory, MMT. I may have talked to you about this before. People who embrace MMT, and these would be professional economists, are of the view that government spending is not a problem. Flooding the economy with dollars is not a problem. Inflation is not a problem, as long as what you're spending it on makes people more productive. And so you heard, for example, I'm not making a shot at the Biden administration, but you heard the Biden administration justify particularly their Build Back Better program in part by saying this is going to make the workers, this is actually going to help us get more production because we're going to train workers, we're going to elevate the education of workers, we're going to make community college free, et cetera, et cetera. That's all going to increase the productive capacity of the economy. This is really coming straight from the MMT people. The problem with that is even if all those things were true, and I won't say they were or weren't, if the programs were implemented, it takes time to do that. It takes time to do that. So that might have been another factor here that the Biden administration might have been pushing against that. So Bill's going to give me the hook.
One more question. One more question that deserves a short answer. Dr. Walden, thank you for being with us today. We have some gift cards that Jerry Miller designed and drew. I've shuffled them to put on top here North Carolina's first public school, which was started by businessmen here in Cary. And in honor of your years of service and your life service as a teacher in our schools, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Please give your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Professor Walden. Come on back next year, we'll give you more cards. Jim Lovejoy, I cut you off.
Yeah, it's actually a miracle moment, but in the district newsletter today, our infamous Tim Maddox was featured. So just to let you know.
We are all over the district newsletter. Mary DePucam is also featured. There are a number of our Rotarians featured. So I did want to recognize Tim and his photograph. You apparently won some sort of a golf tournament based on the photograph here, Tim?
The stash tournament.
Got it. That's a senior tournament. You can't play in that yet, can you?
They don't let me play.
Well, congratulations. Proud to have you featured there. A couple of other important dates to recognize. If you see Anthony Blackman, his birthday is Friday. Wish him a happy birthday. If you see Scott Gardner on Saturday, he'll celebrate 14 years as a Rotarian in our club. So congratulate him and thank him for all of that. Next week, Pat Hudson has our program. Mary Beth O'Neill with the American Kennel Club will be joining us with a talk. Thank you, Pat. And our meal during that talk will be a fried pork chop with mashed potatoes, green beans, and pepper gravy. So bring your tummies. In 2 weeks, Leon Abbas has arranged to have Vitaly Bezrudnov join us. Vitaly is Executive Director of the Rotary Children's Foundation, and a very timely topic. He'll speak to us about supporting children in the Ukraine. So very definitely look forward to hearing him. He's a Rotarian himself. With that, I want to thank Michael Walden. Thank you very much for joining us. Jody online, and Aiden, past president. See, we have forgot to mention, but thank you so much for joining us. We are the Cary Rotary Club. There's no reason to sit with any others. We aim to sit you in the best car that you can afford the first time off the lot. So, all kidding aside, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again. So with that, can I ask Kristen Sutton to please lead us out in the four-way test?
The things we think, say, or do.
This is the truth. It is fair to all concerned. Will it build goodwill to better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
We are. Thank you, everybody.
Sorry.